Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha.
The largest Bhagavad Gita in the world onto the stand. This is a labor of love. The devotees who printed this took a long time to design this and to find the printer that could put it together. It's not just every printer who can make such a thing. It requires 5 people to open the Bhagavad Gita. I'm holding in my hand also. Yeah, you can put it on. Please note that the first book stand that we put it on could not hold the weight of this Bhagavad Gita. So now we need a cloth on top of here. Put some nice cloth. Somebody help Govindacharan. We need him for the next 100 years or so. Bring in some muscle here. So I'm also holding in my hand a card with a genuine pearl, which is affixed to the card. It's a beautiful card with a nice pattern on it, some flowers. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Patram pushpam palam toyam yome bhaktya prayachati taraham bhakti paritam ashnami paritatmanaha. Putting this large Bhagavad Gita here reminds me of in the ceremonies where Lord Ram was asked to bend the bow. Anyone who can actually open the Bhagavad Gita is qualified today to read it. It's a very beautiful book. We're looking at it now. It's really a work of art. It's a beautiful Bhagavad Gita. We brought our photography crew here today, representing CNN over here. Various news agencies from around the world.
Why should only Disney have the fun, right?
Why should only Disney have the fun? Thank you for coming. And welcome to everyone who's braved the weather, severe weather here in California, to come all the way to the temple today. It does make a difference to be together because we are conscious, and there's a transference of consciousness when we're together. In fact, this Bhagavad Gita is the science of consciousness, which is very little known in modern society. There have been some philosophers who have gone somewhat into the science of consciousness and presented an idea that we're different from the material body, that we are something categorically different from matter. But the details of that, and what is the activity of one who is to achieve higher consciousness, and the details of how to organize one's life around the spiritual principle while at the same time carrying out one's ordinary duties. That is expressed in the Bhagavad Gita. So one of the very important verses of the Bhagavad Gita, which tells us something that we can use to our advantage and advancement in spiritual science, comes in the 13th chapter, 22nd verse, in which Krishna says, Purusha prakriti stohi bhunte prakriti jan gunan karanam gunasangosya sarasad yoni janmasu. Dare I turn the page to see if I can get there?
all the hard work the devotees put into making this has been fulfilled by your artful turning of the pages, Prabhu.
I want to make sure I have a little balance here. There we go. Okay. So in this verse 1322, Krishna says that, so this Purusha, you see the first word, Purusha? He's referring to us, or the living entity. Normally, we're called Prakriti, which means that we're the energy of God. And Purusha really means the enjoyer. So, although I'm meant to be a servant and I'm meant to be enjoyed by God, that's a natural situation in which I actually enjoy more. I try to assume the position of the enjoyer, to be the center of attention and so forth. And therefore I assume the position of a Purusha. So interestingly, in this verse, Krishna refers to the soul as Purusha, although we're Prakriti. But then he says, Purusha Prakriti Sto, and Sto means, the modern word stand comes from this word sta, or sto, which is, the O is changed by Sandhi rules. And it means that we're to be situated. This is where we're standing within Prakriti. And what is Prakriti? It's this material nature that we're mixed up in, that we're part of. And earlier in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna has described the elements that make up this Prakriti. And it is Bhumir apo analo vayu kamano buddhir evacha ahankara ityame bina prakritir ashara. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego. So there's subtle and gross elements that are called his binna, or separated energy, separated by consciousness. And it's a lower energy, because Krishna also then says that we're different from those elements. It's not that you can combine those elements together and give them some electrical charge, and then suddenly there'll be a person, a conscious entity. Consciousness is altogether different from the elements, the material elements. This is what Krishna is saying. So in the verse following the one I just said, he says, Aparema tastonyam prakritim vidi me param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam darite jagat. He says, besides these lower energies, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego, there's a superior energy, and that's the living entity. What is a living entity? I mean, if you garden, you'll see living entities everywhere. They have their own volition. They have a lifestyle of their own. Like spiders, they like to make a little web, and they're very good at it. They don't go to Caltech or MIT, and they come out knowing how to build stuff. And there's worms that make their way. I don't know how they know where they're going or whatever. Actually, I do, according to the Bhagavad Gita, because they're getting some divine direction. But I see earthworms, especially when it starts to rain. When I was in the garden this morning, I saw earthworms making their way across the path, and I think, how in the world do you know where you're going? Or even for that matter, crows going across the sky, very determinedly heading in a certain direction. I think, how do you know which direction you're going? Fish, same thing. Salmon go down from their original spawning area into the ocean, which is sometimes hundreds of miles away. Then they swim for thousands of miles for a couple of years. Then they come back to that same river. Then they swim upstream. They come to the very place where they were born, and so forth. The miracles in nature are astounding. Of course, any miracle is astounding. There's a film called Nature's IQ, which was done by a Krishna devotee, just pointing out that miracles abound in this world. And that's the nature of the living entity, which Krishna says in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita is simply amazing. Maybe that's not the best area for Kumbh Mela. He says that the living entity is amazing. These are his words. He said the living entity is amazing. Some see him as amazing, some hear him as amazing. others, even after hearing about him, can't understand him at all. So the living entity is, the living entities are plural. They're parts and parcel of Krishna. They're just like the molecules of sun rays, particles of light that come from the sun. And they have the same quality as the sun, but they have their individual existence. And in the case of the conscious living entities, they have their own volition, which is the most amazing thing in the world, free will, volition, and individuality eternally. So that's the science of Bhagavad Gita. And that's the Bhagavad Gita is specifically written to help us to adjust our situation that we're in, because we are ultimately not compatible with this lower energy. We, meaning the spiritual living entity, are not compatible with this lower material energy. Does that help explain a lot of things? Like why things don't work generally? You have to jiggle them to get them to work. Everything has a jiggle factor in this world, and that things break down right when you run out of ink in your cartridge of your printer, right when you're late for a report, right? Now, everything can go wrong here. What to speak of the fact that it's not a stable environment, whereas we are stable. Krishna says earlier in the Bhagavad Gita that the living entity is permanent. We don't change. We live forever. We're not extinguished. And when I live in this environment, which is unstable, it's a little unsettling, to say the least, because things are always changing, and I notice the change. I'm the observer of the change. Therefore, I'm different from the thing that's changing. So, back to the verse. Purusha prakriti stohi. That's 1322. Krishna is saying the Purusha, he's referring to as us, the living entities who are living in various bodies. Prakriti stohi. We're situated in this lower nature. That's where we are. Sto means that's where we're standing. Bhunkte prakriti jangunan. And bhunkte means to enjoy. So I'm trying to enjoy in this world, and I'm moving about and trying to enjoy in different ways. What ways would one try to enjoy in this world, do you suppose? What? Eating, okay. Watching movies and drinking. Eating, drinking, and watching movies. That's about it. Eating, drinking, watching movies, and shopping. Okay, that's definitely all there is. There's relationships, yes? Sleeping, yeah. You can enjoy sleeping. No one likes, well, most people don't like to wake up. We have an interaction with the material world in various ways in which we try to enjoy. That nobody really tries to suffer. We try to avoid suffering. We try to enjoy. Unfortunately, the kind of enjoyment I get here is flickering because the object of my enjoyment is not stable. And the reason is because this world, Krishna says in the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, is a reflection of the real world. The real world is the spiritual world. And that reality is reflected on this material nature, as if a tree on the side of a river and you see the reflection of the tree. If there are fruits in that reflection and you try to take the fruits and enjoy them, you won't get much out of them. That explains why material enjoyment, which is a misnomer, is frustrating. It's like pursuing a mirage. It looks like a real thing, but it recedes every time I approach it. I can't ever get it. So, trying to enjoy, bhunkte prakriti jangunan, because I'm trying to enjoy in various situations in this world, prakriti jangunan, I'm born again and again in various situations in this world. And he says, the reason that I get sadasat means sometimes bad things happen, sometimes good things happen, relatively speaking, because good and bad are in the eye of the beholder, right? What's one person's food is another person's poison. So I'm born in various situations. Sometimes people ask this question, why do bad things happen to good people? So it's being answered in this verse. Sadasad yoni janmasu. The cause, karanam, is because of guna sango. Everyone say guna sango. There's a third line down in the middle, guna sango. So what is the guna sango? It means association with the modes of material nature. So because this material nature has various modalities, and when I come in contact with them, I'm influenced by them in various ways. And that influence pushes me in various directions. It forms the kind of ways in which I live, the kinds of situations I end up in, whether good or bad. So the key to advancing in spiritual life is to adjust one's association so that it is transcendental and not in association with the three modes of material nature. And that's what Krishna recommends in the Bhagavad Gita, to associate with spiritual sound vibration, to associate with an occupation that's spiritual, and to associate with those who are also like-minded in pursuing spiritual life. And by that association, one will make rapid advancement in spiritual life. When Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was asked, what is a devotee? He said, asatsanga tyag, e Vaishnav achar. He said, a devotee, a spiritual aspirant, is one who avoids bad association. It's a very simple definition. But it works. So by choosing our association carefully, we can become elevated in consciousness. And I'm going to read from this huge Bhagavad Gita here, the purport from this verse, 322. First, the translation. The living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of material nature. This is due to his association with that material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil among various species. Purport. This verse is very important for an understanding of how the living entities transmigrate from one body to another. It is explained in the second chapter that the living entity is transmigrating from one body to another just as one changes dress. This change of dress is due to his attachment to material existence. As long as he is captivated by this false manifestation, he has to continue transmigrating from one body to another. Due to his desire to lord it over material nature, he is put into such undesirable circumstances. Under the influence of material desire, the entity is born sometimes as a demigod, sometimes as a man, sometimes as a beast, as a bird, as a worm, as an aquatic, as a saintly man, as a bug. This is going on. And in all cases, the living entity thinks himself to be the master of his circumstances, yet he is under the influence of material nature. How he is put into such different bodies is explained here. It is due to association with different modes of nature. One has to rise, therefore, above the three material modes and become situated in the transcendental position. That is called Krishna consciousness. Unless one is situated in Krishna consciousness, his material consciousness will oblige him to transfer from one body to another because he has material desires since time immemorial. Shraddha, can you look up the word oblige, please, and see where it comes from? I'm going to read that sentence over again. No one likes to be obliged to move out of a comfortable situation into another less comfortable or at least an unknown situation. Correct? Just Hansapriya doesn't like it. It's fine with everybody else though, right? Hansapriya, I don't like it either. Okay, so I'll read it again. Unless one is situated in Krishna consciousness, his material consciousness will oblige him to transfer from one body to another because he has material desires since time immemorial. What is obliging one to move from one body to another? His material consciousness. The consciousness obliges you to go from one place to another. Did you find it? Okay, go ahead. Anyone who want to guess what language it comes from first? Latin. You want to guess Latin? Could be. Sounds more French to me, though. Okay, go ahead. Huh? You were going to say French? Okay. We'll double down on that. Go ahead, Shraddha.
Oblige is a verb, and it means make someone legally or morally bound to an action or course of action.
Legally or morally bound to an action. Go ahead.
And it gives an example that doctors are obliged by law to keep patients alive where there is a chance of recovery. Synonyms are require, compel, bind, constraint, and obligate. And then the origin is Latin.
Sorry, Nirkula, we lost the house. Okay.
It comes from obligare.
I'll try to get it back on the next one. What? Okay. That's all we have.
So it comes from the Latin word obligere. Ob means toward, and
Ob means what?
toward.
Toward?
Yeah. And ligere means to bind.
Leggere.
Yeah. And Old French, obligeur. From Old French obligeur, it goes to...
Hey, we got the house back. It's a high-stakes game here. Obligere, toward, and ligere means like ligaments. This is the word where ligament is connecting something. You're bound. The ligaments bind together the muscle and the bone and so forth. So obligere, we're bound to something. We're tethered by consciousness, by material consciousness. So really, the objective is to purify the consciousness. And the question is that possible? Yes, it is. There's a system. Bhagavad Gita systematically shows how to systematically purify the consciousness, how to become free from misconceptions. One of the greatest misconceptions is that I am a material product. And the Srimad Bhagavatam explains that this misconception puts us in a state of fear. He says, it says, bhayam dvitiya abhiniveshata syad. Bhayam means fear. As soon as I think that I am a material body and I have a lot to lose, I could become, I'm threatened by non-existence. But in the very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, you're not really threatened by non-existence because you always exist. There's never a time, he says, that I didn't exist, or you, or any of the other living entities. There's only a feeling that I will cease to exist because I identify myself with the material body. And we can see when we also project ourselves into other material items that we have, and we change them by our consciousness from things into my things. Then there's a big difference. There's a big difference between things and my things in this world, right? If someone hits your car, it's a problem for you because it's your car, right? Shraddha's smiling. She just got a new car. It's unimaginable that someone would hit your new car. But there's lots of new cars getting hit right now all over America and around the world, and especially in India. And we're not worried about it because our consciousness isn't invested in them. We invest our consciousness in them by saying, that's my car. That's a designation. that's not eternal. It's not eternally your car. And it's as much your car as any of the other cars are, except that you've projected yourself into it and said, it's my car. And in the same way, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that this body is a car. Where does he say that? Ishvara sarvabhutanam hridesha arjuna tishtiti brahmayan sarvabhutani yantra rujani maya. He says the word in Sanskrit for machine is yantra. He said this body is mechanical. We're non-mechanical. Consciousness is non-mechanical. That's what we are. But just as I may identify myself with my car, I identify myself as my body, and it becomes a problem for me. And therefore, I become full of fear, identifying with the body. So material consciousness, maintaining material consciousness is a disadvantage for the eternal living entity that has ultimately nothing to do with this material world. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada says again, unless one is situated in Krishna consciousness, his material consciousness will oblige him to transfer from one body to another because he has material desires since time immemorial. But he has to change that conception. That change can be effected only by hearing from authoritative sources. The best example is here. Arjuna is hearing the science of God from Krishna. The living entity, if he submits to this hearing process, will lose his long-cherished desire to dominate material nature, and gradually and proportionately, as he reduces his long desire to dominate, he comes to enjoy spiritual happiness. In a Vedic mantra, it is said that as he becomes learned in association with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he proportionately relishes his eternal blissful life. There's a lot to say about that last sentence about losing one's long-cherished desire to enjoy material nature. And maybe we'll say something about that, but first I want to hear if there are reflections. Not if there are reflections, I'd like to hear some reflections. Just reflect back any things that you heard so far from the discussion that stuck with you. Yes?
The point you mentioned about oblige, that's so, how Srila Prabhupada has used that word so intentionally. It's amazing, the import of that verse, especially after we read the translation, how it's binding one. And we're just having a conversation with our landlord. He just increased our rent like by $400, just like that. So we felt like so obliged because our things are already there. If it was like that before we moved, we would never have moved to that house. So now we are obliged to stay there or move out. It's so, like I was reflecting on that because I just had that conversation today, how obliging it is when you have a attachment, or when you already have when you are already there and you can't move out so quickly, like that.
Yeah. And then the whole concept in this verse is indicating moving from one body to another. And there's not a way in which at the time of leaving this body you can say, oh, this is the body I'd like. It's decided by your landlord, basically, who obliges you to a particular body according to the consciousness that you've developed over time. This is the science of consciousness presented in the Bhagavad Gita. And if you don't want to be obliged to these kinds of unceremonious situations where you're moved on or asked to take a situation that you don't really like, and that's what comes up in this verse, Sada Sad Yoni Janmasu. Krishna's not a religious fanatic. He's not condemning anybody. He's just saying, here's the science of consciousness, here's the way the world works. Now you have your own volition, you can work it out. Take the science, apply it, and disengage yourself from obligatory situations by purifying your consciousness. Don't get stuck with another contract in a material body where the rent can be raised and you'll be in a tough situation. What else did you hear that stuck with you? Gandharvika. We need the red microphone goes back there, yellow one stays here. There's 3 microphones that are all zoned for each area.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. I was just thinking how even if we want to change, how you said that material consciousness is the problem which is forcing us to change. But if we want to change anything in this material world, like as Prabhuji said, a house or a car or anything, it's such a tedious process. It involves lots of effort at mental level, at financial level, so many things. But here, how Prabhupada says that just by hearing, even though that's the most difficult thing to change, but just by hearing, Prabhupada is not just identifying the problem, like everybody else do, but he also gives a simple process how by hearing one can change the consciousness and then get out of the problem. So I was just thinking about that.
Such a nice point you've made, that whatever situation we're in now, you don't have to panic, but if you take the process of Krishna consciousness beginning with hearing on a regular basis, you'll be taking the remedy. And an interesting metaphor that Lord Kapiladev gives in the Srimad Bhagavatam is that by performing devotional service, even while one's living in this obligatory situation that one's in now, the consciousness, which is embodied in the subtle body, or at least our material consciousness, is dissolved in the same way that food is dissolved when one eats it. In other words, when you ingest food, it's digested in the stomach. So he said, in the same way, our material desires and the material contamination, our subtle material body that binds us to the gross material body, into this world, is gradually diminished by the process of devotional service in the same way that food is digested when put into the stomach. So you can stay in the situation you are, but apply the process of Krishna consciousness. So you don't have to change your job, your style, the clothes, but you just have to change your consciousness. Thank you. Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, I really love the point when you said no panic. I was just thinking that if you have a car, home, mortgage, rent, job, everybody is always in a panic state that I'm not too sure when this is going to go away from me. But when we think, apply Krishna consciousness and we consider ourselves to be servants of Krishna, I say that it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't belong to me anyway. It belongs to Krishna. If he chooses to give it to me, he'll give it to me. I will use it in his service. And if he chooses me to move along, and I just go along. So, so much of today's life stress just goes away. It just comes to zero. And I just think that, it doesn't matter. I'm not doing anything. I'll just go ahead with it. So, I was just thinking that I've recently gone through a situation where I was so thinking about it was creating so much tension. As soon as I thought about it, I said, okay, I'm Krishna's servant. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to stress about it. And then literally from 100, the stress came down to 0. I was absolutely feeling fine. So just wanted to add that point. Thank you, Prabhu.
Yes, Satyadev, that's a nice point. Thank you. Satyadev Prabhu likes to point out we have our life and we have our life situation, and there's two different things. Life is something that you are all the time, that is eternal, that is beyond the touch of this material world, and your life situation is the projection of who you think you are in this world. Very much like watching a movie. We sit down, the movie begins to roll, we watch the lights, we identify with the characters who begin to cry, then we laugh, and then again we cry, and then the lights come on and we think, where did we go? We took a journey because we identified with the movie. So there's a way in which on the screen of our mind, our life situation is projected, and the more I identify with it, the more I experience the changes of material life. Sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I'm sad, sometimes I'm panicked, and so forth. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives us a different perspective, and that is that he says, Kshetragnam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetrishu bharata kshetra kshetragnayo jnanam yastat jnanam matam mama. He said, this is knowledge, to be able to see the difference between yourself and the body that you're living in. This is real knowledge, to be able to distinguish between the two. Thank you for that nice point. Yes, Rasika Shiromani, all the way in the back. The red microphone goes to her. That goes for the back row.
The point where Srila Prabhupada says that the living entity thinks himself to be the master of his circumstances, yet he is under the influence of material nature. That struck me. Like I was thinking, even today while we were driving to temple on our way, at one point there was so much rain, so we couldn't see anything in front of us. So it shows us, like in our day-to-day life, that you are not the controller, even though we think if we have a card, we can go anywhere. But we are under the influence of nature. And then I was thinking, when will this rain stop? And then it stopped, and then we were able to see clearly. So it's reminding, Prabhupada is reminding us to like not think like that, which I felt striking.
One day very nice point. I like that you connected it to an experience that happened just recently. When I was walking one day down Burlingame Avenue, near where we live, just on a regular health walk, and I saw this man with his daughter, very young daughter, just 2 or 3 years old, and she was running ahead of him as if to sort of leave him behind and go off on her own. A very independent spirit, so running down the street. And he was running behind her, sort of allowing her a little bit of space. And then at the same time, he was noticing me and a couple other pedestrians who were walking along who were watching the whole scene. So it was just an interesting confluence of people and watching the incident and him observing his daughter. And he said to us, several of us who were watching the whole thing, he sort of rolled his eyes a little bit and he said, "She thinks she's independent." I was like, where can she go, really? And in a similar way, I think I'm independent. But I'm really, Krishna is always there providing whatever I need, and he's right behind me, sort of facilitating that spirit of independence. But actually, I'm fully dependent at every moment, just as that young child was. A couple more. Yes, Prashant.
Hare Krishna. I really liked the point that you made about how the key to advancing in spiritual life is adjustment. And this is so relevant, right? Because you're always going to be in situations which are like not comfortable. You're going to be thrown out of your comfort zone, right? And like this week, I had to like accidentally travel to some place.
What happened?
I traveled.
You traveled?
Yeah, travel. I didn't anticipate this. And then, so the day was incredibly long. And then I did my usual rounds of chanting. But because I didn't anticipate, right, and the day was long, and we had to like, the meetings were over and then we had to go for dinner, right? And it was almost like 9 o'clock. And I was sitting in the restaurant, I was getting worried, that guys, I need to go and you guys don't have some life and something like that. Things were going on in my brain. The point here I'm trying to make is somehow, every day, right, you need to basically anticipate and adjust, thinking that, what is coming ahead. If you don't adjust, right, that day I had to go down on my rounds, unfortunately, but I didn't anticipate, I didn't adjust like early, wake up like an hour early in the morning, something like that.
Yes, so there's a way in which Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that we have obligations. Of course, the Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam also says, along with your birth in this world, you've had so many debts and obligations just as soon as you're born. And you have a life situation that you have to deal with. Just because you see the difference between your life and your life situation doesn't mean you're not obligated to continue with your life situation. However, there is a way in which Prashant is pointing out that one should make a wedge. Wedge is a very powerful tool. It has a very small end and a big end, and it enters in a small way and it ends up exiting in a much larger way. So in our spiritual life, we have to make our practice obligatory. The more we make our practice obligatory voluntarily, I guess that's contradictory, but if we oblige ourselves to practicing spiritual life, then gradually we'll be able to become free from the material obligations. Yes, Shivatsa.
If we are the soul and we're like driving a car, which is our body, does that mean that we don't take care of our body, or we just have to care for our soul?
You take care of your car? Do you have a car?
No.
Your mom has a car, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does she take care of it?
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes, because it's a machine. You have to take care of it. I mean, in a volunteer organization like ISKCON, we've seen a lot of situations where it's public property, so nobody takes care of. Change the oil every 5 years or something. Yes, you have to take care. Part of yoga means to take care of the body, because right now it's the platform that you're living in. It's the vehicle that you're using. So it doesn't mean you neglect the body, but Krishna says you should be yukta. Yukta harabiharasya, yukta cheshtasya karmasu, yukta swapna babodasya, yogo bhavati dukkha. He says, eat as much as you need. Don't eat more, don't eat less. Means you don't starve yourself, but you don't eat more. You eat to live, don't live to eat. And in similar ways, you should take care of your body. Needs a certain amount of exercise and all kind. It needs a little recreation. You have to recreate yourself, and so forth. So you have to take care. Yes, Shraddha. There's some devotees have texted in on the internet, so we'll hear from them.
Maharaj, this is a newsflash.
Newsflash.
We got the first offer for a pearl.
We got the first offer for a pearl that came in via text.
And this is Kalakili Mataji.
Oh, how nice.
Yeah. And she has a question that she won't be able to make it today because she's at work. And so she wanted to offer it. So maybe we have I'm pretty sure there'll be many more who are still online and would like to offer a pearl. So can they come later in the week and do it? Offer it? Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, you can get a pearl today and offer it later if you like. What else, Shraddha? Okay. Other reflections? How is everybody? You look great. So today we're also going to offer the Bhagavad Gita to anybody who wants to. In a practical way, the Bhagavad Gita is written down. It was spoken on the battlefield of Kurukshetra 5,000 years ago, and now it's in written form. So what does that mean? Books are containers. They hold ideas. And they change people's lives. All kinds of books, whether it's philosophy books, practical books, but throughout history, we notice that there are various ideologies that take hold in human society all over the world. And generally those come from books. People speak about various philosophies, but unless they back them up in writing, they don't go very far. Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith, talked about, in that book, he talks about a whole economic system which is prevalent all over the world now. How many of you have that book at home or in your car? Wealth of Nations? Anybody read it in college, high school? One person. But everybody knows about capitalism and so forth. And Adam Smith talked about that. And now it's prevalent philosophy. It came through a well-written book. Did you find it to be well-written? Somewhat. Right. So we may or may not buy into capitalism, but it's prevalent all over the world, and people accept it as a philosophy that's important. Similarly, Karl Marx wrote books, and those books represent a certain philosophy that people know about around the world and actually organize their society around. The American Revolution took place because, according to historians, a well-written pamphlet by Thomas Paine. And the revolution in Cuba under Fidel Castro took place because of his writings. Point is, the pen is mightier than the sword. And when somebody writes something down and organizes it and puts it into a book, that can go out into society and actually affect people in various ways, good or bad. Whether it's right or wrong, it still has its effect on people. Origin of the Species, Charles Darwin. Anybody have that in their car? You have it in your car? No. Okay, but you've heard of his philosophy, right? I mean, so many people simply present it as if it's an absolute fact, and the reason they do is because the ideas that he thought about and wrote were written down and then distributed throughout society, and people read it and took it as a plausible explanation for the way things are. In a similar way, the Bhagavad Gita is specifically, it's written down so that it can go out to people all over the world, and people can take advantage of it. Think of each book, see each one of these books here, is a container. The word broadcast comes from farming. It's a farming term, to broadcast. It means to throw seeds far and wide. And in a similar way, then it became more well known for radio broadcasts, television broadcasts, and so forth. When one distributes books, one's broadcasting. Broadcasting what? Seeds. What kind of seeds makes all the difference in the world? So our premise is that the idea seeds that are within the Bhagavad Gita are specifically important, are vitally important for human society, because they contain the ideas that are intrinsically spiritual and which transform people's consciousness, making them peaceful, as Krishna says in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shantim richiti. One can attain peace by accepting the basic premises of the teachings in Bhagavad Gita. Actual peace of mind. And one can develop this spirit of nonviolence towards all living entities, ahimsa. All good qualities come from the spiritual practice. And from that, the world begins to transform. So the way of distributing books, putting them in various places and institutions, going to people's homes and so forth, and offering them the Bhagavad Gita, which we find to be extremely rewarding because so many people are interested in talking about the Bhagavad Gita or are appreciative that the devotees come around and talk to them, whether in their place of work or at their home. They're very open-minded, especially here in California. So we have this very large campaign to print as many books in as many languages and to distribute throughout the whole world, because it is a viable means of affecting the world in a positive way. That is, if you're distributing literature that is based in spiritual knowledge. And Bhagavad Gita is the most standard and important spiritual book in the world, one could argue. And we have another text, 2 more texts.
This is Rasprad Prabhu, Rasprad Das.
Oh, very nice, Rasaprada.
So he says, Hare Krishna, my dear Gurudev, please accept my sincere and heartfelt obeisances and dandavats. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and to you as well. We live in a hospital and we all want to be cured. If we accept the reality that we are not this body, that we are just using it, then we start developing the consciousness, and the best and the easy way is hearing and chanting. Then we will develop the intelligence to be used in order to get cured and get out of this hospital.
Thank you, Rasaprada.
And the other one is from Aditi Mataji. She used to watch these programs from India, and now she has moved to New York. She's studying there.
Nice.
One of these days we might, see her in ISV. Yeah. So, Hare Krishna Guruji, please accept my humble and respectful obeisances unto you. I liked the difference between things and my things. It's our basic nature to get bound to anything we falsely believe is ours and not to the rest. That's where we get engaged by material nature. But only by hearing and thinking about Krishna is the way to disengage ourselves from the clutches of material nature. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
So articulate. That was nice. Thank you very much. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Satatam kirtayanto mam. So what are the recommendations Krishna gives is to chant, to sing the transcendental vibration. So why don't we try that? Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, hey, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman, Nachari Armarman.